Hello and welcome back to the show. I am your host, Megan Hardy, and today I am joined by a very special guest, Miss Louise Digby. Louise is a registered nutritional therapist. She's a weight loss expert. She's the host of the Thriving Metabolism podcast and the creator of the Nourish Method that helps women get their dream body, supercharge their energy, and overcome frustrating symptoms like bloating, bowel problems, skin complaints, and much more. So I am so excited to have her here with us today. And Louise, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited too.
Yes, I'm so pumped to have you. And all of those topics, I think my listeners will be like, yep, 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 that's me. So I'm pumped to talk with you more. And first, just want to start by asking you a little bit about yourself and just how you got into the nutrition space.
So I graduated in 2012, and I think I ended up going into nutrition initially because my mum had a really strong interest in nutrition. And when I grew up, I kind of was brought up with my mum telling me about food and kind of what it does for you and all that sort of thing, and not in like a diety way, in a really
Mm,
wholesome nutritional way. So that really gave me that interest in nutrition, and I knew I wanted to work with people and helping people. So it kind of seemed like the logical step for me is to go into nutrition and study it properly. And then once I started practicing, I was working with everyone and anyone in terms of whatever problem they had, whatever goal they had. I would help them with it. And then over time, I've narrowed it down to specializing in weight loss for women, in that kind of midlife stage, over 35, 40, mostly because it's an area where, so many women struggle, and there's such poor support for that particular problem. The typical options that are out there, your typical diets, they just don't cut it. So
mm.
I was just seeing so many women, struggling and so frustrated that I kind of ended up really digging into the research and, trying to find out what was going on and how to address those issues.
Oh my goodness. It's such a like important and much needed space to be in. I
Mm,
was just actually talking with a lady the other day who's in my challenge that I'm doing. And she was like, I have gone to endocrinologists and my gynecologists and my doctors, and they all just say, like, yeah, it's just menopause. You're just like, it's just age. And she's like, I'm hard headed. So I was stubborn enough to like, no, I know that's not the end or not the answer. And she was like, and I'm realizing it's not. There's more that can be done. But it's
mm,
such a like, you're in such a needed space. We need more people like you.
yeah.
And I think that's so awesome that your mom was started off with like I feel like a lot of people who have a really healthy upbringing on nutrition, oftentimes it's like on the negative side of things of they were pushed into diets at 10 years
Mm.
old and all of that. So that's really awesome that your mom got you started on such a great footing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's interesting because she did a really good job, because when I first went into my studies, I none of it was like a big revelation for me. Obviously I learned a hell of a lot while I was there, but the initial basic stuff, none of it was a big revelation. Whereas the people around me were like, their minds were blown by lots of things. So she did a really great job.
Oh, that's amazing. Does she do anything in the nutrition space now or if she just
No,
enjoys
she
it?
doesn't. It's what she always wanted to do, but I think just through, having children and then my dad having a business, she got kind of swept into that and didn't get to fulfill her what she wanted to do, unfortunately.
Ah, gotcha. Well, she raised you up in the way, the way that she wanted to go with nutrition. So that's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, I would love to jump on in and just one of my first questions for you, and even with this whole like episode today, just want to talk kind of more specifically to that demographic of women who are, you know, post 35 years old, struggling in their 40s and 50s with their weight. That's a lot of the people who listen to this podcast as well. So I think you'll have a lot of good nuggets for them.
Mhm.
But just even curious, like, What are some, even things that people might not think about as being factors that are impacting their weight? Like what are maybe some hidden factors that they're not even thinking about as far as weight gain?
Yeah, well, there's lots because most of us just think about, trying to clean up our diet or cut back a bit and trying to burn some more calories. But there's a lot more going on that impacts your weight management than just your calorie balance. And factors like your gut health can have a big impact because in the gut, it's where we eliminate our hormones, it's where we absorb our nutrients, it's where a lot of toxins and inflammation can be produced. And they're all things that also have a big impact on your fat burning as well. So that the gut is a really big one because it's linked to so many areas in the body. And then, some factors that people don't often think about are things like sleep and stress. I've worked with so many people where, they've been doing really well, they've been seeing really good progress, and then suddenly the progress stops. And they're like, I haven't changed anything. I'm still planning, I'm still eating everything I should be, I'm still moving. But when we dig into it, their sleep has, deteriorated because of whatever is going on in their life. And that's the only thing that's changed. And then when we bring that focus back to quality sleep, they start seeing the progress improve again. So, we forget
Gotcha.
how important it is for our bodies to be able to repair and rejuvenate through rest and good quality sleep.
Oh my gosh. I think that one goes so underrated. People are like, it's fine. I'll just cut my sleep. I'll go get my workout. And I'm like,
Yes.
no, don't do that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm always asking people, do not get up an hour earlier to go to the gym unless you're getting at least 7, if not 8 hours sleep per night, because you will get more out of that extra hour's sleep than you will out of going to the gym.
Yes, and the impact on weight too. Like, and I've been doing this challenge. It's 21-day challenge with people in my Fit You community, and I've been doing it alongside them. And I've shared with them as well. It was like the scale was going down, and I got a poor night of sleep, and it went right back up. So it's so impactful for your weight.
Mm,
And then gut, like of course they call what the gut your second brain, right?
yeah,
And so
yeah.
how impactful that is too. I think that's such a good point to make and something that a lot of people overlook.
Mm.
Well, what would be some strategies that you would give everybody as far as like helping with their fat burning potential, whether it's correlated to those or outside of that?
I think the first thing that I always want people to start thinking about is shifting away from the typical diet approach. And the typical diet approach is all about restriction and punishing workouts and just trying to get the biggest calorie deficit you can. Whereas if we switch it around to thinking about what does my body need to thrive and to function optimally, then we start thinking about, okay, so we need nutrients, we need nutrient dense foods, we need hydration, we need sleep, we need rest, we need to manage our stress and relieve stress. um we need to think about the toxins that we're exposed to. Our bodies don't need these toxins, so they're damaging to our system and disruptive to our hormones. So when we flip it around and start thinking about what does my body need to thrive, or what's causing disruption, then it's a very different journey, and the focus is on better things than just the calorie control.
That's so good. I actually was listening to one of your podcast episodes. I don't recall who you were interviewing, but y'all were talking about specifically just the restriction mindset versus and also talking about compulsive eating or binge eating that goes along with
Mhm.
that. And I think she had mentioned like the rebel inside of you
I
wanting
think it
to
might be a
do
lady called Harriet.
okay. Yeah, it was a great episode, but like I think it's so much more than that. And that's like
Mm,
all the things you just listed is like so many things beyond just the calories and calorie
yeah,
restriction.
yeah.
So that's super, super helpful. Well, like especially for people over for women over 40, like do you give like beyond that, what are your recommendations? What changes, what stays the same what just needs to be dialed in? What would be some of your recommendations for losing weight when you are going through perimenopause and
Mm.
menopause?
So I think the key thing to recognize when you're going through that transition is that your physiology is changing, and that means that your hormones are changing, potentially your muscle mass is decreasing because of the change in those hormones. And so again, the typical diet approaches, they're not going to help. They're probably going to make that worse. We're going to speed up that decline of hormones and that loss of muscle, which results in really stubborn weights. So we want to make sure that we're taking steps that are really supportive of hormones and really supportive of maintaining muscle mass. So the first thing to think about is protein, because
Mm,
protein so important for your muscles, so important for your hormones. We need the protein to make our hormones, and we need it to repair our muscles after a workout. If we're not having enough, then we could actually be losing muscle mass as a result of our workouts. So that's the first thing to be thinking about, getting your protein optimal, specifically getting it in with breakfast, um,
mm.
because it sets you up for a good day in terms of keeping those blood sugars steady, which keeps your hormones more steady, keeps you fuller, helps to reduce cravings, helps with your sleep. You go on and all day about the benefits of protein. So that is where I would start, is just, starting to weave in more protein into your diet.
So awesome. I think my community probably gets tired of me talking about protein.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, but I'm
It's
like,
one of
but
those things where
it's
like, that everyone's sick to death of hearing it, but you've got to keep saying it because you just cannot overlook it.
no, you have to keep saying it too because it's gets overlooked. You're like,
Mm,
but no, really, sleep and protein.
yeah. Sleep and protein.
Sleep and protein. No, and I think that's I want to touch on too. You mentioned like as far as being supportive of your hormones, but you've also mentioned in some of your work that, just talking about hormones also being the another symptom,
Yes.
whereas so many people are thinking of it as the root cause and are, then like I need HRT or whatever, which may be needed in some cases, but looking at hormones as more as a symptom. Can you talk about
Mhm.
that a little bit
Yeah,
versus
definitely. So the I think what's helpful for people to know about hormones is how they're kind of made in the body. So, we make our hormones from the nutrients that we eat, and then your hormones, they have to do their job in the body, and that might involve being converted into other hormones. It might involve them binding to your cells, and then they have to be detoxed by your liver, and then they have to be eliminated via your gut. So they go on this whole journey, and at every point of that journey, there can be problems. If you're not absorbing your nutrients properly from your gut and you're not digesting your food properly, if you don't have a nutrient dense diet, then we could have deficiencies that could impact the production of those hormones. If you've got inflammation, disruptive blood sugars, deficiencies, that could disrupt the way that the hormones function in your body. If your liver is under a high toxic load, or the liver pathways are sluggish, then you're not going to be detoxing your hormones properly. And if your gut bacteria isn't balanced, if you're constipated, you might not be eliminating your hormones properly. So all those areas where you can have an impact on the balance of your hormones by, working on, whether it's your digestion or your liver detoxification or inflammation or whatever it might be. So really, when you have imbalanced hormones, that is the result of imbalances in those other areas, in the gut, in the liver, inflammation. They're not the problem in and of themselves. So that's a really good thing, because it means that, if your hormones are contributing to your stubborn weight, then there's loads that you can do about that.
see, like, and I think that information is so empowering when you're not just like, oh, my hormones are just, they're going to be what they're going to be as they get
Mm,
older and going to get jacked up, but like recognizing they're actually a symptom and not necessarily the root cause. If you get to the root cause underneath, there's a lot you can do
yeah.
to help, which is very empowering. Well, do you have any suggestions? I know this could probably go down an hour rabbit hole each. But any suggestions as far as being supportive of your gut health and then also your liver, like in detoxification? Any suggestions that you could share?
Yeah, I think in terms of being supportive of gut health, one of the best things that you can do is make sure that you have as much variety of different fibers in your diet as possible. So, lots of variety of different unprocessed plant foods. Doesn't mean that you can't eat meat or animal products, but we just want to make sure that we have got plenty of plant based foods in there and lots of different types as well. That will go so far to support your gut health. And then you can, also think about different colored fruits and vegetables. You can think about fermented foods like sauerkraut and kimchi and miso, all really great for supporting the beneficial bacteria in the gut. And that's a really good place to start. And if you do that consistently, then you're probably going to be ahead of most other people in terms of gut health. Um, and particularly if you've had to take antibiotics like ever, then you probably want to do some work on your gut health. But if you have to take them, then really doing some focused work on your gut afterwards, upping the probiotic foods and the fiber rich foods is going to make a big difference. Um, and then
Do
in terms
you
of support, sorry, go on.
real quick question. Do you often suggest any like supplemental probiotics, or are you like really the whole foods first approach? Like when do you um usually suggest or incorporate if you do probiotic supplementation?
So we definitely try to do what we can with food first, but supplements can be really, really helpful. The I think the struggle that I have with probiotics is that you have to get a really good quality one.
Mm.
You have to get ones that are actually going to make it to the gut intact or make it to the colon intact. Um, and also, they only really help if your problem is caused by a lack of beneficial bacteria. And there's many different problems that could be going on in the gut. There could be an overgrowth of bacteria. So they're definitely not a cure-all. They're worth a try because they're fairly harmless. So they can be helpful, but if they don't help, it doesn't mean that that all is well in your gut, or it doesn't mean that they're not going to help in the future. It might just be that there are some steps you need to take before those probiotics are going to be appropriate for you.
Yeah, yeah, it's really like it could help or it could be a little bit of a waste of money, but
Yeah.
no biggie.
Yeah.
No, and I think you're exactly right too, going back to what you said about you're probably doing better than 90% of people if you're just incorporating more, fermented foods and a variety of fruits and vegetables. I can even speak
Mm.
for myself. I'm like, I get stuck on the same fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm like, I need to switch it up a little bit more.
Yeah.
So it's a good reminder. I need to hear that just like all of everyone in my community needs to probably hear eat your protein. I need to hear
Mm.
switch up your vegetables, Megan. Uh, but and then also any other for suggestions for gut and then for liver too, liver support.
Um, Gut wise, I think I'm just trying to think. What I've said so far is like a good place to start. Chewing your food properly. I
Mm.
mean, we can't overlook the benefit of chewing your food properly. When you chew your food thoroughly, it it stimulates your digestive enzymes and your stomach acid production, and then that helps you to actually break down your food better, and then you get more out of that food nutrition wise. And it also helps your brain to register that you've actually had a meal and eaten something. And again, it's one of those really boring recommendations that no one wants to hear, but it's so powerful. So yeah, chewing your food, you know, highly recommend.
It's I highly recommend. It's another one of those things I'm like, I'm really bad at and I don't want to hear it because I inhale my food.
Yeah.
I should just probably start chewing my food better.
Yeah, well, they've done research on it, and they've done various studies on kind of behaviors around eating. Some of them have been on people just sitting down at a table to eat a meal versus other people who are perhaps holding something in their hand and eating it as opposed to eating with a knife and fork. All these comparisons, and what is found time and time again is that when we actually make a conscious moment of eating where we sit down, we eat with a knife and fork, we chew our food properly, the impact on our gut health is profound. People that struggle with IBS and terrible bloating and flatulence and all these issues, the symptoms just reduce dramatically when we chew our food properly.
Mm, which is so wild. Again, it's like
Yeah.
it's so simple, but it's not necessarily always easy to
No,
do or
no.
to do that practice.
Yeah.
And it almost feels like an oversimplification, so people skip over it, but it's
Yes.
not.
Yeah, and it's so often the basic things that will have the most impact. The core foundations of chewing properly, staying hydrated, eating enough protein, sleeping. If you can do like just those four things, you're probably going to feel a lot better. And I don't want to say that in a way that kind of minimizes or diminishes kind of the problems that people are having. They're there could be, fairly complex things going on in people's bodies with their hormones and inflammation. But just because they're complex problems doesn't mean that they have complex solutions. The solutions
Mm.
can be quite straightforward and simple.
Oh, that's such a good point to make. And sometimes they do require a little more complex work, but
Mm,
oftentimes complex, what did you say? Complex problems can be simple solutions.
I said something like that. I mean, I
Something
made that
like
up
that.
on the spot. I was quite
I,
impressed of it when it
I know.
came out.
I was like, I wanted to repeat it because it was really good. And I'm like, wait, what exactly did
I
it?
think I said complex problems don't have to have complex solutions or something like that.
Something like that. We'll go back, rewind the
Yeah,
tape.
yeah,
um,
absolutely.
that is so good. What about for liver support and detoxification?
Yeah, so for liver support, there's kind of two main things to think about. One of them is just reducing the burden on your liver. So when a lot of people think about liver support, they just want to do a detox, but actually what's much more impactful is reducing your exposure to the things that make your liver have to work harder. So things like um, plastics and fragrances or artificial fragrances and parabens and phthalates that are in skincare products, some skincare products, I should say, not all. Um, Things like pollution and pesticides, all of these toxins that we come into contact with, whether it's for our skin, for our food, or we're breathing it in, they're all things that your body has to detox and your liver has to eliminate. And a lot of these toxins are very similar in their chemical structure to your hormones, particularly estrogen. So if we have a high load of these that we're exposed to, then they can basically block estrogen from doing its job on your cells. It can block your liver pathways, or not block, but kind of burden your liver pathways so that estrogen isn't detoxed as efficiently, meaning that it gets recirculated around your body, causing estrogen dominance and disruption. So just starting to reduce your exposure to these toxins can have a big impact. And that might look like choosing a little bit more organic food if you can, or choosing foods that aren't so high in pesticides where you can. It might mean filtering your water. It could mean getting houseplants that help to purify the air, or an air purifier. um, that sort of thing. There's
Okay.
lots that we can do, switching up your skincare to reduce the parabens and phthalates that we find in our skincare.
So good. So good. Getting that glass Tupperware instead of
Hmm.
plastic Tupperware.
Yeah, I
Um,
love it. I love my glass Tupperware. It's so handy. You can cook in it and then just whack the lid on and you're good to go.
whack the lid on. Yeah. And also the flavor is so much better because it doesn't
Yes.
absorb that second day old plastic
Yeah.
flavor. It doesn't taste like the fridge like it does if you put it in plastic.
That's so true. That's so true.
Oh, that's so good. So good. So really, and I know that's a big one too, is liver support, being supportive of healthy estrogen levels too, because I think so many women struggle, whether they're in like menstruating phase or, perimenopause, menopause, but with that like estrogen balance
Mm,
too.
yeah.
So that's a really good correlation, and something to focus on. Anything else that you would add for gut or liver support? Did we touch on
There's, I
everything?
mean, there's so much that you can do for
Yeah.
all of them. I'm trying to think of things that would apply to most people. I mean, staying hydrated, again, so important for your liver function because your liver produces bile, which needs to flow through to the gut. If you're dehydrated, it's going to be thick and sludgy, and that means you can end up getting crystals or blockages in your biliary tree. And that's basically the pathway between your liver and your gut. So if we can stay hydrated, then that really helps to minimize those blockages and keep that kind of flow of waste going from your liver to your gut so it can be eliminated properly. And you can optimize your hydration by using, things like fresh lemon juice, things like chlorophyll, um, even, things like flax seeds can help really well because when they're ground up, they bind to the toxins in your gut and help to carry them out. And you can add those to your water if you want. It's interesting texture, but it's one way of taking them.
I was about to say, I think I've never actually done that. So
Mm,
I'd be curious to try, and also
mm.
the texture too. That's awesome. And also even just as far as like balancing your hormones like to help you lose weight. Could you talk a little bit more about that, and also just how it applies or may apply differently to women in their 40s and beyond?
Yeah. So in terms of how it applies to everyone in terms of it's really hormones that control your whether you're burning fat or storing fat and kind of how fast that process happens. But for women, once they're in their 40s or they're starting to go through this perimenopausal transition, what's happening is your ovaries are starting to reduce their production of your sex hormones, and your adrenal glands, which are your stress glands, are starting to take over some of that production. So there's a shift happening. And what that means is that you're kind of more prone to hormone imbalance. You're much less resilient to the impact of stress, whether that is emotional stress or whether it's physical stress, like over exercising, under eating, pain, that's lack of sleep, that sort of thing. Um, so that type of stress is will have a knock-on effect on your hormones. So it will kind of throw your sex hormones out of balance even more. So the natural the decline in hormones through that perimenopausal phase is totally normal and natural, but the imbalances in your body, whether it's from stress or gut imbalances or inflammation or deficiencies or that sort of thing, they can basically make that transition more problematic with hormone levels fluctuating a lot more, declining a
Mm.
lot more rapidly overall. And that's when we get the problematic symptoms, all the menopausal symptoms, and the stubborn weight to come with it. So ultimately, what this means is that stress management during this phase is so, so important, to help really support your sex hormones and your thyroid to stay in balance.
So important. And I know like that's one thing too, a lot of women are struggling with. Like there's a labeled the menopause belly, with
Mm,
that really stubborn midsection weight that comes. And I think that's one thing that a lot of the women I talk with, that's like their primary concern is like that tire around the center that just won't go. Is there, I know like, well, we know we can't spot reduce specifically, but is there anything that you suggest? Is it some of these tactics that we've already talked about for women as far as really helping with that like stubborn menopause belly and
mm.
midsection weight gain?
Yeah, the thing to note about menopause belly is that it didn't come from gluttony. It didn't come from laziness. It's the result of the change in hormones and, you know, generally the rise in stress hormones, potentially, in some insulin resistance can drive that as well. So what that means is that you're not going to get rid of it by starving yourself. And I work with so many women who have been almost starving themselves. They've been doing really low calorie diets before coming to me, and they've lost loads of weight, but they've still got this belly that they can't shift. And it's when we get more into working on the hormones and working on stress management, but also supporting the body to have a healthy stress response. That's when we start seeing that stubborn belly fat shifting.
And because that's, I mean, that's so true. Is like, I think so many women go straight to restriction and super low calorie diets, but then our body actually sees that as another stressor
Yes.
on the body.
Completely.
So it's adding insult to injury a little bit
Yeah.
with that stubborn weight gain. What would also like along, so like on the nutrition side, it sounds like for, actually eat more, fuel your body, eat more
Mm,
protein, eat a diverse fruits and vegetables, diversify your foods, eat your probiotic rich foods, prebiotic rich foods. On the workout side of things, what are you typically prescribing? I know that's probably a range again, depending on the
mm,
person, but for helping support women through perimenopause and menopause, and especially with um, stress reduction, what are you kind of prescribing on the workout side of things?
mm. Yeah, it definitely does depend on the individual, but as a generalization for most women, um, I find that kind of scaling back a little bit on the intense exercise and the prolonged cardio, and doing a little bit more in terms of strength training, and lower intensity exercise like your yoga and Pilates, walking, swimming, those sorts of things. They are much more impactful. And part of the reason is because it's really important to build muscle. So working on more of the muscle development as opposed to the calorie burning of cardio is really helpful. And then also, they're also quite stress relieving in terms of yoga, Pilates, and those lower intensity workouts. They don't drive up your cortisol level quite so high whilst you're working out. So that's really important, and I think that's especially important if you are someone who is quite stressed. It's sometimes I see people who are so busy. They have a high pressure job, they've got kids, they're up at the crack of dawn to get the kids off to school, they're working all day, trying to meet deadlines, sorting out the kids when they get home, and then they're going to the spin class, which is super high
It's
intensity, and then they wonder why they can't sleep
yeah.
and why they can't lose weight. And
Yes.
actually, they need just the opposite. They need a really low intensity session, still to move their body, still to get their blood pumping and use their muscles, but not something that really drives up their heart rate quite so high. Um, so yeah, that's often what I'm trying to encourage women to do, and it can be a really difficult shift because it's so drummed into us that we just need to burn those calories. And also, a lot of people do those high intensity workouts for their mental health, and
Mm.
because they feel like they're shaking off the stress. So it can be a tricky shift to make.
Actually, that's a follow-up question I have because I
Mm,
think that's one thing. It's already hard enough to get sometimes women on board with um, scaling back a little bit on really high intensity exercise or cardio for its stress and the physical results and purposes. Just because that's what has been drummed into us. Like you better sweat it out and do high intensity to burn that fat off, is what's
mm,
been drummed in. But and then on the mental health side of things, like where do you find help or how do you help women through that balance of? Because I'm like I also get it when you're like I love running. Like I don't understand it. I don't know if you're a runner, but like I'm like I am not, and so I'm like I don't understand that, but I do know there are a lot of women out there who just like
yeah.
love their marathon training and running. And so how do you help them through finding that balance of like, okay, if this is something you need for your mental health and because you love it, like I never want to take away something that you love to do because that's a stress reliever. But then
Mm.
also if you have certain physical goals, and we need to lower stress, we have to find that balance. How do you help women through navigate that?
Yeah, and again, it will look different for each person. And I think it's partly a case of looking at priorities and what's important to them at the time. But also, it could be meeting in the middle, and it could be just doing a little bit less, um, a shorter duration of cardio. And it could also be looking at your nutrition around the cardio. One of the things about not just cardio, but just really intense exercise, is that it drains your sugar stores from your muscles. And then if you don't replenish that afterwards, that's really stressful for your body. Um, so just having some carbs after a workout and replenishing those sugar stores can help to drive down cortisol. Because it's always going to go up. It's always going to go up when we're exercising, if there's any sort of intensity to it. But the problem is bringing it back down again. So
Mm.
that might mean, fueling yourself properly after a workout. It might mean taking a little bit longer after your cardio to do some lower intensity exercise as well, or just some deep breathing or walking, or putting on some really soothing music in the car on the way home or something like that, just to like bring yourself back down again. And really managing your nervous system.
Oh, that's so good. And some of those things, again, it's like so simple, but we don't do it
Yeah.
oftentimes. And I think that's a great point to make too on nutrition. Using that to your advantage if you are doing higher intensity exercise or cardio, because your body doesn't know the difference of, hey, Megan just finished working out, like our cortisol and stuff. We're still up here.
Yeah.
And just because like we finished our last set or, just finished our run, our body doesn't like recognize that right away. So like
Mm,
using carbs, especially to your advantage of like, insulin and cortisol kind of working inversely of each other and being able to shut off that response with nutrition too.
mm,
And being supportive of that is such a great point. One
yeah.
other question I wanted to ask you too is how to be supportive of, progesterone and estrogen and how they can get kind of wonky through perimenopause and menopause, but especially, in estrogen and building muscle, like how can you help support? Because, as we're aging, it's like it gets harder and we can lose muscle each decade, but there's things that we can do to help support it and counteract that. But then also estrogen being so important in building muscle.
Mm,
How are you being supportive of that or helping women to support their estrogen in their 40s and 50s in relation to building muscle?
mm. So the one of the problems as you go into perimenopause, the kind of the balance changes throughout, and initially you might be prone to being estrogen dominant, and that might not be because you've got high estrogen. It could be because your progesterone is too low, or it could be that your progesterone is dropping quicker than your estrogen. But then towards the end of perimenopause, both of them are likely to be low. So it kind of depends on where you're at, but a lot of what we've talked about today will support those areas. So when progesterone is dropping too quickly, that could often be because of stress. So we would want to make sure that we're taking, putting a lot of effort into managing stress and all that stuff to do with exercise, not going too intense. In terms of supporting your estrogen levels, again, stress management will help. Um, but a lot of the stuff that we were talking about in terms of making sure that we're getting the right nutrients in, protein, omega-3s, B vitamins, zinc, all really important for making your hormones in the first place. And then avoiding those hormone disruptors that we were talking about, the toxins that can kind of interfere with and get in the way of estrogen doing its job. Um, and then something else just came into my head and I can't remember what it was now.
It came and left.
Yeah, it came and left. Um, so production of estrogen and then making sure it doesn't get disrupted. Um, yeah, it's gone. That's annoying.
I know it's so annoying when that happens. No, and I think that's a great point you made too about because like estrogen dominance can be just simply even because progesterone is too low. It's that balance
Mm,
of hormones as well. So supporting both is important too through
yeah,
that process. Is there
yeah.
anything else? Oh, go ahead.
I was just I just remembered what it was that went out of my head. It's
Oh,
come back
good. Yay,
again.
it's back.
I was going to talk about phytoestrogens, so
Ah,
plant-based estrogens, which can come from various sources, but things like soy, I would suggest organic soy, is a great source of phytoestrogens, which are Again, they're very similar to our own estrogens, but they've been shown to basically have like a modulatory effect where they, if your estrogens are a bit low, then more phytoestrogens can be really helpful to almost like top them up. And if your estrogen's too high, well, because they're very weak estrogens and they bind to our estrogen receptors, they can almost block the estrogens, which is a good thing if your estrogens are too high. So it can help to manage the symptoms of that. So phytoestrogens are a nice thing to incorporate as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Is there anything else that you would add as far as specifically speaking to our women over 40? Anything else you would add or any last tidbits or advice?
I think the main thing that I would say is that if you are feeling like you're trying everything and nothing's working, then like just know that it's not your fault. What
Mhm.
you've been taught about how to lose weight just doesn't fit with this phase of life. And you just need to basically take a much more nurturing approach to your body than what you've been taught to do.
Yes. And that's why I love, with your program, the nourish method, right? That's what they need to do is nourish, focus on
Yes,
nourishment.
absolutely.
Yes, so good. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. And I think everyone listening will get a lot of nuggets out of this. Where can everybody find you? What's the best way to reach you?
If you go to my website, which is louisedigbynutrition.com, you'll find lots of free resources on there. I have a masterclass that you can watch anytime that's really popular. And it walks you through kind of the my process that I go through with my clients to help them balance their hormones and support their metabolism. And I also have a 5-day boot camp, which is something that you can do anytime as well. And I can give you a promo code so that your listeners can get 50% off as well.
Wonderful. That would be perfect. And we can add all that in the show notes too, so they can grab those. That would be amazing. Well, thank you
Amazing.
so much. I appreciate you and thank you for coming on the show today.
Oh, thank you. It's been so good. Thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely.